brought in the guides from the shop here to talk about some fall monster fishing tactics. Let's meet them now. Guiding out of Minocqua, Wisconsin, the big ticket, Doug Smith. Guiding out of Eagle River, Wisconsin, EJ Elmer Jensen. Guiding out of St. Germain, Wisconsin, Pete Stoltman. Guiding out of Minocqua's south side, Frosty Al Frost.
Okay, now since the weather's turned nasty, we've had a lot of below freezing temperatures as highs now in the last week or so. What I've been doing a lot of is getting baits a little deeper and being able to slow things down a little bit. So a lot of people ditch the bucktails, the spinner baits and stuff this time of year, but I actually like to go towards that method because the water's a little bit dirtier now, you're getting some turnover action, and the fish are closer to the bottom, so you've got to get down there at them and give you a little bit more vibration with a spinner attached to it, or any kind of a tail or anything like that. So what we've been doing is we've been taking these swim baits here, and we saw these spinnerbait arms at the Musky shop, and we've been adding, it almost acts as like an inline spinner or a safety pin spinnerbait. And basically what I've been doing is throwing these out, counting them down to desired depth, and just slow rolling these so that the blades are barely turning and these tails are barely wobbling, and you can maintain that deeper depth where those fish are closer to the bottom or in the little bit deeper water. The water's a little bit, if it's cloudy out, the water's a little bit dirty. You need this extra vibration, the extra flash will help you out with just outrun just a plain rubber tail. And also you can also run some of the heavier spinner baits we sell here at the shop here. The 4-ounce Rad Dog, just a couple other models. Musky Male makes a heavier one too. And basically what you're doing is counting them down and just slow rolling them. And as you bring them up towards the boat, you maybe give it a few pumps, but it's just maintain the blade speed and the thump down there, and then you can attract the fish from those depths.
Doug, you guys got a big fish this week with a client, didn't you?
Yeah, we got that. It was about 25 feet of water. The bait was about 20 feet of water down when he caught it. So just slow rolling a big Rad Dog spinner bait, and it was right over moon overhead. It was a tough day. We didn't see any other fish that day, but that made a 49-incher made for a pretty good day for the young person that caught it.
When the weed beds start to die off, I go to the deeper weed edge, and I like to use one of my favorite baits, 10-inch weighted suic. Works really good for me, and that's a real good bait to use. I like the sucker patterns because we all know that in the fall of the year the muskies really turn on to suckers. So anything that kind of resembles a sucker or something of that pattern is going to work pretty good on that deeper weed edge.
Deep shad slammers are a great bait. They have a lot of wobble to them. They will get down nice and deep to those depths where the bait fish are at, and just been a real productive bait for me. One of the things that I like, since I do a bunch of row trolling, is that at very slow speeds, like I'm rowing maybe 1.5 miles to under 2 miles an hour, this thing will still get down nice and deep and has great action. You don't have to go necessarily 4 or 5 miles an hour speed trolling to get this thing to do what it needs to do to get fish. So those slammers are a really good option for your fall trolling.
Hi, it's Al at the Musky shop. I'm talking about post-turnover presentations. Now, when I came into work yesterday, it was 24 degrees. That's awfully cold to be casting because you're going to freeze up your reels. You're going to have a real mess. So I usually start the day trolling. And one of the things I like to pull is a 13-inch grandma. This happens to be one of our Musky shop custom colors. The reason I picked this one off the rack is it's got all the colors I like to use in clear water this time of year. When the water's real clear, greens, blues, and purples seem to show up, and a lot better in clear water than a lot of the brighter stuff and a lot of the more natural colors this gets their attention. So you got to pick a lure that you know where it's going. That's why I like Grandma. I'm very familiar with them. I know where they're going to be. Trolling isn't just dragging, it's putting it in front of them, and you got to keep that bait in that zone. So you got to know where your bait is all the time. Now, once you figure out what you're doing and where you're going, you get a better feel how deep you want to be. There's ways to adjust that by line length. It's just a bell sinker with a little clip on the end, and you can snap that little clip right onto the line, and you can remove it as easily. You just snap it on the line. And now this is a real generalization because it's speed and all that comes into play, but you get 3 to 5 feet for every ounce of weight you put on the line. So you put on 1.5 ounces, you're going to get like 6 feet out of it. Biggest thing about trolling is knowing where you are. Now that makes a line counter reel really handy. The primary break into the main basin of the lake is where I usually start, and from there I go deeper. But that's usually where I'm going to start. I want to keep this thing above the fish, so wherever you're seeing bait fish, you want to be above them. If you're marking bait in 15 feet of water, you don't be putting the bait down 25. That ain't going to work. Keep it where they can see it. And when it warms up a little bit, and then you can get the meat out and start fishing with suckers. But yeah, if I had to pick one way to fish, it probably wouldn't be trolling, but it's the only thing you can really pull off when it's 20 degrees. Keep it repeatable, keep it in front of them, make it duplicatable, and it'll work out for you. Give it a try. It'll pass a lot of time waiting for it to warm up.
Well, the time's arrived. My favorite time of the year, the vertical jig. I've been doing it since the early 90s, but the equipment nowadays and the bait these days have really gotten a lot more conducive to have a more effective presentation. So this is kind of the setup I've been running the last few years. As far as equipment-wise, a rod, these new rods here that are, you want it more of a more moderate heavy rod, because oftentimes you're jigging during like really cold temperatures. You don't want to shatter a high-end graphite rod. So this 8-foot the shield rod, trolling shield, wide bait rod, it's got a little bit more moderate to it, and you don't have to worry about snapping in cold weather. And now these new jig rippers have come out. Before we would do the water pump trick where you have to hold the rod or the reel and do some of this stuff here. This relieves a lot of fatigue. You can switch hand, you can turn this around. It just gives you a lot more power, torque, less fatigue. And now these power reels too here, you got here's a dive line counter. You can actually know exactly how much line you got out when you're letting it down. It also has the level wide that stays engaged, so it doesn't load up on one side, so it's easier to feed the line up because you're just basically going vertical. So you're feeding out 20, 25, 35, 40 feet of line, and it feeds out nice and even. And you can also use the line counter. You can know exactly how deep you are if you're not watching it on your graph, which a lot of times what I'll do is just watch the bait on my graph, and you actually see where the bait's at relating to the bottom. You'll see the bait fish, you'll see the fish come up on the bait. You see all that stuff with these new high-tech graphs. And my all-time favorite is a Fuzzy Desert. It's been around for years, but I still use it all the time. It's real good in windier conditions because it stays down. It's not real buoyant. It's pretty much snag-proof, and it creates a lot of flash, a lot of vibration. And you just make sure when you lower it down slow, pop it up, lower it down slow. They usually hit it on the way down, but you're in constant contact with that bait at all times. The hookup percentage is almost 100% when they hit this thing. Nothing but metal and hooks. And also another good option is a Bondi bait. It gives you a plastic option, a rubber bait, a little slower fall. You get a tail gunner bait on here. This is the wobbler. It wobbles on the way down. You pull it up and slow down. Just make sure you follow your line each time you drop the bait, and most of your strikes will come on the downward. What I like to do is find transitional areas like the rock mud line, whether that's 30 feet on a certain lake, it could be 40 feet, it could be 20 feet on a shallower body of water. And I kind of work that runway where those fish, the suckers, the ciscos and stuff will use that break, and so will the predators, the muskies. So I kind of stick, you can actually take a Fuzzy Desert and feel when you're on hard bottom versus soft bottom, so you can actually feel the mud, also you feel hard bottom. Feel mud, you kind of go back and forth, you're stirring up the bottom a little bit, you're banging rocks, creating a little bit more sound down there. It's an awesome presentation because you can leave your gloves on, you can fish when it's below freezing. The conditions aren't, if you don't want to troll, you can also use it in conjunction with a sucker. You can have a sucker out near that, on the other side of the boat or near the presentation. And a lot of times you'll attract them on the artificial to hit the sucker, or vice versa. They'll be attracted by the sucker and actually hit the shinier, more aggressive bait. So give fall jigging a try this year, where the time's already hit us. It's really good through all the way up to ice up.
Yeah, the other favorite bait that I've got to use in the fall is the Countdown Depth Raider. Now that's this bait here, and it's weighted to where you can count it down to the depth that you want to work it at. So if you want to work it 15 foot deep to 20 foot deep, you just count it down to 15 to 20 and start your retrieve. And what's nice about this bait is if you get a fish to follow, this bait will stay down. It won't rise up like some of these other crankbaits that rest on surface. So that's another good thing. You can keep it right in face of that muskie as on a figure 8. So that's one of my go-to baits in the fall of the year is the deep diving, and I like the straight model when the water temperature gets down in the low 40s and below, because you can work it a little bit slower, and it doesn't have quite as much wobble to it as a jointed bait. And you can also twitch this bait too in them depths of water, instead of a straight retrieve, you can rip it, pause it, it'll stay right there, and you can rip it and keep, work it back to the boat that way. Sure. Works great.
If I am going with a vertical presentation, I like something like this. This bait here is the H2O Barbarian. You can either use this as a completely vertical jigging type of deal, or you can cast it out, count it down, and just reel it in. And it'll work very well in both of those kinds of conditions.